Ladies and gentlemen, my name is TotalBiscuit of the WoW podcast. Blue please on cynicalbrit.com. Welcome to a Wipe-a-thon 3000 presentation, and shiz just got real, yo. It's the first ever video that I've done of Cataclysm raid content. It became available a couple of days ago, but I was at that land, so I couldn't really do much. This is for a boss called Halfus Wyrmbreaker. He is fairly challenging. He has a number of interesting mechanics. As with all Wipe-a-thon 3000 presentations, these will be a series of progression wipes going from our very first attempt all the way through to the last one before the successful kill. The successful kill will be in a separate video. I will show the first wipe at 100% speed, just so you can get a feel for the fight, and then the rest of it will be accelerated. So, what does this guy do? Well, the first thing he will do is he will bind a dragon to his will, and at that point you need to start DPSing that dragon immediately. The weird thing about this fight is that it's got a little bit of Blackwing Lair style mechanic to it. I.e., every time you go in here, and indeed when it resets on a weekly basis, a different dragon is selected. You see that one in the corner there that seems to be a little bit drunk and or knocked out. Well, that dragon doesn't do anything, but if you go in another week, that dragon might be the one you have to fight. In this case, we have to fight this stone dragon that I am told, and this may or may not be the case, of course, because very little information about raid so far, that this guy is one of the hardest, if not the hardest possible option that you have to fight. So, the Slate Dragon, you need to worry about something very specific, and that's the Paralysis Aura that he can pop out, and you can see it right there ticking off. I'm taking constant damage from the fire of that Proto-Behemoth Dragon. You don't have to DPS that, by the way. So, everyone gets locked down, including the tanks, so it's very, very tricky indeed to keep the tanks alive. You've got to stack up your hots, make sure that everyone's topped off before that happens, and then sometimes frantically heal the things and the targets that have taken an awful lot of damage. You see it there, you get a couple of ticks every second, so it's fairly significant. It'll take off a good half of your health, and the main problem you're going to run into is the fact that the tanks are taking a stacking healing debuff, which requires a tank rotation. That debuff is created by the main boss itself, not the Slate Dragon. Raid damage is not crazy here, but anyone close to that dragon is going to take a large amount of damage. There is a fireball barrage that does about 30 to 40k, and in combination with the healing debuff, that can be very unpleasant indeed. That appears to have a 5 to 10 yard or so radius, so melee attackers are going to get hit by that potentially, as are the tanks. Now, once you've killed the Slate Dragon, you then have to deal with these whelps. So you bring the whelps over, and indeed you should really bring the boss over to the whelps. It makes things a lot easier. We were very late here, and you've got to try and bring those whelps down very, very quickly indeed. Obviously, the whelps are doing damage within that area right there. It's not too difficult, but you may also notice that we do have a debuff that has been created as a direct result of those whelps being up. So killing them as quickly as possible is something you really do have to do. As you might have noticed by the lack of damage, once these emerald whelps are up, they will do a raid-wide debuff that causes a 2000 reduction in all damage done, so you do want to annihilate them very fast. However, once you kill them, you gain a buff against the boss, or more accurately, the boss gets a debuff. This happens also on the Slate Dragon. Once the Slate Dragon dies, you gain a 50% damage debuff against the boss, and once these die, you get a 100% damage debuff. Now, I was mentioning the RNG mechanics earlier, and the mechanic that the Slate Dragon actually gives to Halfus, the ability which you can actually see right there, is Malevolence Strikes. Now, what Malevolence Strikes does is it causes that healing debuff, and we're having it really stacked up here, which is not good at all. Got to do the swap over there, and if you look at the raid frames on the left-hand side of the screen, you will start to see it stack on the other tank. Now, while we're going on here, I might as well tell you about the abilities of the other 3 drakes that you could potentially come up against. Like I said, the Slate Dragon is arguably the most unpleasant. There is one called the Nether Scion, and the Nether Scion actually applies a raid-wide debuff which ruins your hit chances, 15% less. It also reduces your attack speed and does 25% less damage until that drake dies. The Scion gives a special ability to Halfus, which is Frenzied Assault, which doubles his attack speed. Now, apparently this is removed when the Nether Scion dies, whereas with the Slate Dragon, that Malevolence Strikes ability doesn't go away. Now, the Time Warden's probably the easiest one. The Time Warden routes everybody to the spot. Now, you can get out of it using various escape mechanics, but it'll just be reapplied again, so there's not an awful lot of point. That's about all it does. Except it actually gives you a benefit. It slows the Proto-Behemoth's fireballs, so you can actually physically dodge them much easier. I mean, right here, considering the speed that they move, it's a little bit tricky. But honestly, you can heal through it anyway, so there's not a huge amount of point. Now, the other Drake, the last one, is the Storm Rider. Now, while the Storm Rider's up, you can only use instant cast spells, because he keeps doing raid-wide interrupts every half a second. It's ridiculous. The boss also gains an ability called Shadow Nova, which is a area of effect damage attack with a knockback component. And you've got to watch out for that one, because it's nigh on impossible to interrupt while the Drake's alive. But once the Drake dies, the boss actually gets a debuff, which slows the casting speed down to about 4.5 seconds, so you can interrupt it at that point. Otherwise, it's going to be pot luck, because it's like a 0.5 second cast, so yeah, good luck actually interrupting it if you are very quick on the draw, or if you just simply spam interrupts and hope to land it, then it might work. Okay, now you've noticed we've actually got him to, well, could you call it Phase 3? I suppose you kind of could, really, and he is now spinning around hurting everybody. It's not an instant kill mechanic, but obviously if you can avoid it, you should. The melee is going to have to get in there because this fight does have a nasty hard enrage, and it will kill you horribly. There is no way you will survive more than a few seconds with that enrage up. So it becomes a DPS race. Your melee can't afford to get out of that, so the healers are going to have to work overtime. That might be the time you want to use your Bloodlust / Time Warp. It's probably a reasonable idea. You'll see right there, he's actually gone red. We didn't have the damage to kill him this time, and he's absolutely slaughtering everyone. So that pretty much covers the mechanics of the fight. Now I'm going to show you progression of wipes as we get better and better, and show you exactly what needs to be done, because there are a couple of pitfalls that you want to avoid here. Now, this wipe demonstrates a couple of things, and most importantly, it demonstrates what happens if you don't top off the tanks before the paralyzation phase, and if you also stack too many of those nasty healing debuffs. Now, our Paladin, I believe, admitted to lay on handsing the wrong target here, so, you know, that was a mistake by the healer, and like I said, you make mistakes. This is progression wiping, that's what happens. The idea is that you don't repeat those mistakes, and that's what makes you a good player as opposed to a bad and a scrub. So we're going to go in here, and I'll show you exactly what happens. We open the same way as we did previously. Try and get a little bit of damage on Halfus. It's always good. You don't want to be wasting time here. You get about 5 or 6 seconds before he activates the dragon. So get a few good solid casts on him, stack some dots up on him, and then start working on the dragon. Now, there's the first Paralyze, and as you can see, we've got a lot of damage being done right there, and lay on hands on the wrong target kills the main tank, which means that that's effectively a wipe. Unless you can battle res the tank very quickly, you're just going to get a stack of healing debuffs. The health is going to go down like a truck, and that, as they say, is that. So do be careful about your healing targets. I would perhaps recommend, if you have heavy single target healers, assign targets. Be very, very specific as to who your healers are going to be healing. In this case, we're rolling with a 2-tank, 2-healer, and 6 DPS setup, which is what I would recommend for a 10-man. 3 healers is going to cause you to wipe on this because you won't be able to hit the enrage timer. In this case and in this fight, you'll notice that the raid-wide damage is fairly light. You've got those fireballs going all over the place, which, as long as you don't stand in the same spot, then you'll be okay. In this point, we were actually doing that anyway, because we had our nice area of effect hots right there. We were healing through it without too much of a problem, and honestly, if you're not having any problems keeping the raid alive, then you don't really have too much to worry about there. But like I said, raid-wide damage is fairly light, and it does get an awful lot lighter once you get rid of the dragon. Needless to say, if you have a Warlock, health stones across the board will certainly assist your healers in terms of keeping your raid alive and alleviating the load on them, because the healing is quite intense on the tanks in the first phase with the Stone Dragon. That last wipe demonstrated what happens if you don't deal quickly enough with the spiky damage of that Fireball Barrage, which is coming in from that Stone Dragon. It is really not nice, honestly. It hits like an absolute truck. healers have just got to be prepared to help as much as possible, use cooldowns where necessary, because this is the most difficult bit of the fight. Once the dragon is down, it simply becomes more of a DPS race than anything else. Don't stand in the fire, try and avoid as much damage as possible, do as much damage to the boss as possible, and of course, watch out for the whirlwind once you get him down to about 30% or so. Now, honestly, there really isn't an awful lot more to show you about this fight. It's not particularly complex. It's not the easiest fight in the world, but it's certainly not all that hard. It is the first boss of the instance, so there are a number of schools of thought as to how the first boss of the instance should actually be designed. One of those is it should be a gatekeeper boss whereby it's nice and hard and it acts as a, hey, if you're not good enough to beat this, then you're definitely not good enough to beat the rest of the instance, so just go and gear up, go and get better. And other people think that it should be a boss that's a nice starter for 10, something that just sort of warms you up, maybe a little bit of a freebie. I think it's something like Rage Winter Chill or the Void Reaver here. There's a lot of different possibilities, and Blizzard seems to be torn between several different design philosophies at the moment. Some of their heroics have gatekeeper bosses, whereas in this case you have a raid whereby it's not really a gatekeeper boss, it's not massively challenging, it's certainly going to wipe you for a night, and obviously the difficulty is very much dependent on which of the drakes you end up having to face. But it's not rock-solid difficult, and it's certainly not something you're going to be slamming your face against for weeks and weeks in an effort to get down. That's probably going to be the second boss, which I will show you in a future Wipe-a-thon presentation. Now, I am going to release the actual kill of this particular fight, and that will be in a video that should be coming up tonight, I think. So I'll pop that one out, and you'll be able to see the successful attempt as well. That's all I've really got to say about this fight, aside from coming to the conclusion that it's certainly not bad. It's definitely not the worst encounter that Blizzard's ever come up with. It does have some fairly standard mechanics. The fact that the dragon's just sort of standing there, breathing on you at random is kind of weird, honestly, but it's not a bad fight. It's not the best fight, but it's a good starter for this instance, and it does get an awful lot better as we go in, and I'm looking forward to showing you content from the rest of the Bastion of Twilight, as well as the Blackwing Descent and the Skywall in the coming weeks. Ladies and gentlemen, my name has been TotalBiscuit. This has been a Wipe-a-thon 3000 presentation for Halfus Wyrmbreaker in the Bastion of Twilight. I'll see you next time.